Part 1. The Forgotten Colony. The morning alarm echoed through the prefabricated corridors of New Haven Colony, just as it had every day for the past 15 years. Jake Morrison rolled out of his narrow bunk and pulled on his standard-issue coveralls, the fabric worn soft from countless washings. Outside his small quarters, the artificial lights hummed to life, casting their pale glow over the metal walkways that connected the colony's scattered domes. Jake had been the colony administrator for 8 years now, ever since the previous administrator had suffered a heart attack during a routine inspection of the mining equipment. At 42, Jake was considered middle-aged by colony standards, where the harsh environment and demanding work aged people quickly. His brown hair had already started showing gray at the temples, and the lines around his eyes spoke of two. Many sleepless nights worrying about supply schedules and equipment failures, he made his way to the communications center, a cramped room filled with blinking displays and humming processors. The morning routine was always the same: check for incoming messages from Earth, review the overnight status reports from the automated mining systems, and prepare the daily briefing for his senior staff. But today, like every day for the past 4 months, the communication boards showed nothing but empty space where incoming vessel signatures should have appeared. Lisa Hayes looked up from her workstation as Jake entered. The chief engineer was 35 years old, with short blonde hair and grease permanently embedded under her fingernails. She had arrived on New Haven 7 years ago as a junior technician and had worked her way up through sheer competence and an uncanny ability to keep aging machinery running long past its expected lifespan. "Still nothing from the supply convoy?" Lisa said without being asked. "The quantum relay is functioning perfectly on our end, but we're not picking up any traffic from the core systems. It's like the entire communication network just went silent." Jake nodded grimly. The monthly supply runs were the colony's lifeline to civilization. Every 4 weeks, a cargo vessel would arrive carrying food, medicine, replacement parts, and news from home. The ships would load up with processed rare earth elements and return to the inner worlds, maintaining the economic relationship that justified New Haven's existence. Dr. Chris Sullivan appeared in the doorway, holding a steaming cup of recycled coffee. The medical officer was a thin man in his 50s, with prematurely white hair and a perpetually worried expression. He had volunteered for colonial service after his wife died in a transport accident, seeking isolation at the edge of known space. "Jake, we need to talk about the medical supplies," Chris said, settling into one of the worn chairs around the conference table. "I've been stretching our inventory as far as possible, but we're down to critical levels on several essential medications. Mrs. Patterson's diabetes medication will run out in 2 weeks, and I've got 6 people showing early signs of protein deficiency that I can't treat without proper supplements." Lisa pulled up a holographic display showing the colony's industrial status. Red warning indicators dotted the 3-dimensional map like angry stars. "The medical situation isn't our only problem," she said. "Mining platform Alpha has been running on backup systems for 3 weeks now. The main power coupling is shot, and I can't fabricate a replacement with our current equipment. If we lose that platform, our ore production drops by 40%. Jake studied the reports with growing concern. New Haven had been established as a mining colony specifically. BECAUSE Kepler 442c contained some of the largest deposits of rare earth elements ever discovered. The planet itself was barely habitable, with a thin atmosphere and surface temperatures that dropped to minus 60 degrees Celsius during the long winter months. The colonists lived in enclosed domes and underground facilities, venturing outside only in environmental suits. The colony's 3,000 residents had adapted to the harsh conditions over the years, building a tight-knit community that took care of its own. Children attended school in converted storage compartments, while their parents worked 12-hour shifts extracting valuable minerals from the planet's crust. It wasn't an easy life, but it was their life, and most of the colonists took pride in their contribution to humanity's expansion into space. Bobby Martinez, the security chief, joined the morning briefing with his usual punctuality. At 28, Bobby was the youngest member of Jake's senior staff, but his military background and calm demeanor had earned him the respect of the entire colony. He had served 2 tours with the Colonial Defense Force before accepting the position on New Haven, seeking a quieter assignment after losing his entire squad in a pirate raid near the Vega system. "Perimeter sensors are clear," Bobby reported, taking his seat at the table. "No unusual activity in the system, but I'm concerned about our defensive capabilities if something does show up. Our patrol craft are 15 years old and barely spaceworthy. The automated defense platforms haven't been updated in 3 years, and we're down to 60% ammunition for the railguns." The meeting continued for another hour, with each department head reporting similar problems. The colony's infrastructure was slowly failing without regular maintenance and replacement parts. The hydroponic gardens that provided fresh food were showing signs of nutrient depletion. The atmospheric processors that kept their air breathable were operating at reduced efficiency. Even the entertainment systems that helped maintain morale during the long, dark months were beginning to malfunction. Jake dismissed his staff with instructions to prepare contingency plans for extended isolation. He knew they were all thinking the same thing, though none of them wanted to say it out loud. Something had gone wrong in the core systems. The silence from Earth and the inner colonies suggested a catastrophe of unprecedented scale, possibly war or some kind of natural disaster that had disrupted interstellar commerce. As the day wore on, Jake found himself spending more time staring at the empty communication displays. He thought about his daughter Sarah, who would be starting her 2nd year at the academy on Mars. He thought about his ex-wife Helen, who had refused to join him on New Haven and had filed for divorce rather than follow him to the edge of civilization. The quarterly personal messages from home had stopped arriving with everything else, leaving him to wonder if the people he cared about were even still alive. The afternoon brought the usual sounds of industrial activity, the rumble of mining equipment, the hiss of atmospheric processors, and the chatter of workers going about their daily routines. Children played in the recreation domes while their parents extracted wealth from the planet's depths. Life continued, even in the shadow of uncertainty. That evening, Jake stood in the observation deck of the main administrative dome, looking out at the alien landscape beyond the transparent aluminum windows. Kepler 442 sees 2 small moons hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the rocky terrain. In the distance, the lights of mining platform Beta twinkled like earthbound stars. It was then that the proximity alarms began to sound. Part 2. The Zephyrian Ultimatum. The proximity alarm shrieked through every corridor and dome of New Haven Colony. Jake Morrison sprinted from the observation deck toward the communications center, his heart pounding as emergency lights bathed the metal walkways in flashing red. Behind him, he could hear the colony's public address system crackling to life as automated systems began broadcasting evacuation procedures that everyone hoped they would never need to use. In the communications center, Lisa Hayes hunched over her sensor displays, her fingers dancing across the control panels as she tried to make sense of the readings flooding her screens. The incoming signatures were massive, far larger than any human vessel in the colonial fleet. Worse, they were approaching from multiple vectors, suggesting a coordinated arrival that spoke of military precision. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa called out as he burst through the doorway. "We've got 23 contacts inbound, ranging from destroyer class to something that's showing up as big as a city. They'll be in orbit within the hour." Dr. Chris Sullivan and Bobby Martinez arrived moments later, both breathing hard from their rush to reach the command center. Bobby immediately moved to the tactical displays, his military training taking over as he assessed the threat. What he saw made his face go pale. "Those aren't human ship configurations," Bobby said quietly. "The hull profiles match Zephyrian Imperial designs from our intelligence databases. If that's accurate, we're looking at a full battle fleet." Jake felt his stomach drop. Everyone in human space had heard stories about the Zephyrian Empire, though few had ever encountered them directly. They were an ancient species that had been expanding across the galaxy for centuries, conquering worlds and enslaving populations. With ruthless efficiency, Their technology was rumored to be centuries ahead of anything humans possessed, and their military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and total victory. Options? Jake asked, though he already suspected what the answer would be. Bobby shook his head grimly. Against a force that size? We have 3 patrol craft that might last 30 seconds in a real fight, and our defense platforms were designed to handle pirates and smugglers, not a military invasion. If they want this planet, they can take it. Lisa was already working on emergency protocols, routing power to the colony's communications array, and preparing their limited transport vessels for potential evacuation. I can boost our transmission power by maybe 40% if I cannibalize the backup systems, she said. But even at maximum power, it would take weeks for a distress signal to reach the nearest relay station. The waiting was the hardest part. For 37 minutes, the colony watched as alien ships approached their world, growing larger and more menacing with each passing moment. Families gathered in their homes, holding each other close while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the children. Workers abandoned their posts at the mining platforms, rushing back to the safety of the main domes. When the ships finally entered orbit, they blotted out portions of the sky like moving shadows. Jake stood in the communications center, surrounded by his senior staff and a dozen other colonists who had nowhere else to go. Through the observation windows, they could see the sleek, predatory shapes of Zephyrian vessels hanging motionless above their heads. The communication request came exactly 1 hour after the fleet's arrival. Jake accepted the transmission with trembling hands, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of everyone on New Haven. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship. The alien commander was tall and angular, with pale blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When he spoke, the translation software rendered his words in perfect, emotionless English. Human settlement. Designated New Haven colony, the Zephyrian said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. I am Admiral Kethver of the Imperial Fleet. This system has been claimed by the Zephyrian Empire for resource extraction and strategic development. You have 24 standard hours to evacuate this world. Jake found his voice, though it came out weaker than he intended. Admiral, this is Colony Administrator Jake Morrison. New Haven has been a legally established human settlement for 15 years. We have mining rights and territorial claims recognized by the Galactic Commerce Council. Admiral Kethver's expression didn't change. Human legal concepts are irrelevant. This world contains resources required by the Empire. Any humans remaining after the deadline will be considered hostile combatants and eliminated. Compliance will result in transportation to a designated relocation facility. Resistance will result in immediate termination. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the communications center in stunned silence. Jake stared at the empty hologram projector, trying to process what had just happened. In less than 2 minutes, their entire world had been stripped away from them by an alien species that viewed human life as nothing more than an inconvenience. Dr. Chris was the first to speak. 24 hours, he said quietly. Even if we started loading the transports right now, we could maybe evacuate 200 people per trip. With 3 ships working around the clock, we might save 1,000 people. Maybe. Lisa was already running calculations on her portable computer. The transport vessels weren't designed for extended journeys. Their short-range shuttles meant for moving people between the colony and orbital stations. The nearest human settlement is 6 days away at maximum burn, and that's assuming perfect conditions and no mechanical failures. Bobby studied the tactical situation with professional detachment, though Jake could see the pain in his eyes. We could try to fight, he said slowly. It would be suicide, but we could make them pay for this world. Maybe buy some time for more people to escape. Jake walked to the observation window and looked out at the colony that had been his home for nearly a decade. In the distance, he could see families loading personal belongings into ground vehicles, preparing for an evacuation that most of them knew they would never complete. Children who had been born on New Haven played in the corridors, unaware that they might not live to see another sunrise. "No," Jake said finally. "We don't throw away lives on meaningless gestures. If we're going to die here, we die trying to save as many people as possible." And the next 24 hours passed in a blur of desperate activity. The 3 transport ships began ferrying colonists to safety, focusing on families with children and essential personnel who might be needed to establish a new settlement. Lisa and her engineering teams worked frantically to strip useful equipment from the colony's infrastructure, loading it aboard the evacuation vessels along with as many supplies as they could carry. Dr. Chris organized medical triage, determining who was healthy enough to survive the dangerous journey to safety and who would have to remain behind. The decisions were heartbreaking, but they were necessary. Every seat on those transports represented a life that might be saved. Bobby coordinated the evacuation with military precision, maintaining order despite the growing panic among the colonists. He organized volunteer teams to help load the ships and establish communication protocols to ensure that families weren't accidentally separated during the chaos. As the deadline approached, Jake found himself standing in the communications center with nearly 2,000 colonists who had been unable to secure passage on the evacuation ships. They were the unlucky ones, the people who had drawn the short straws in humanity's cruelest lottery. But they were also his people, and he would not abandon them to face their fate alone. "If anyone receives this message," Jake said into the colony's recording system, "know that we believe someone would come for us. We believed in the strength of humanity, and we died with that faith intact." Outside, the first Zephyrian landing craft began their descent toward New Haven Colony. Part 3. The Earth response. 3 weeks before the Zephyrian ultimatum reached New Haven Colony, Admiral Kate Chun sat in her ready room aboard the UES Vengeance, reviewing intelligence reports that painted an increasingly grim picture of the galaxy's outer rim territories. At 51 years old, Kate was one of the youngest admirals in the history of the Terran Defense Force, having earned her rank through a combination of tactical brilliance and an unwavering dedication to protecting human colonies scattered across known space. The fragmented distress signal from New Haven had arrived at the Proxima Centauri relay station 3 days earlier, carried by quantum communication bursts that had taken 16 days to cross the vast emptiness between star systems. The message was barely coherent, consisting mostly of emergency codes and automated system warnings, but the implications were clear enough to send chills down Kate's spine. Lieutenant Commander Ben Harper, Kate's intelligence officer, spread holographic star charts across the conference table in the Admiral's ready room. The display showed dozens of red markers indicating colonies that had gone silent over the past 6 months, creating a pattern that stretched along humanity's expanding frontier like a spreading infection. "The situation is worse than we initially thought," Ben said, highlighting specific systems on the display. "New Haven is just the latest in a series of attacks. The Zephyrian Empire has been systematically targeting isolated human settlements, moving deeper into our territory with each assault. Our long-range scouts confirm military buildups in at least 12 systems along their expanding border." Kate studied the tactical situation with the cold professionalism that had made her one of Earth's most respected military commanders. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for threats like this, training in war colleges and commanding increasingly larger fleets in exercises designed to test humanity's ability to defend itself against superior alien technology. "Response time?" she asked. "If we mobilize immediately, 18 days to reach New Haven at maximum burn," Ben replied. "But Admiral, even our fastest ships would arrive too late to prevent whatever the Zephyrians are planning." "Standard Imperial doctrine calls for complete resource extraction within 72 hours of planetary occupation." Kate walked to the viewport of her ready room, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so welcoming to human expansion. Somewhere out there, 3,000 human beings were about to face annihilation simply because they had dared to build homes on a world that aliens wanted for themselves. The thought filled her with a cold fury that she kept carefully controlled beneath her professional exterior. Send a priority transmission to Fleet Command, Kate ordered. I want authorization for Operation Thunder Run within 6 hours. If Earth won't authorize a rescue mission, I'll take my battle group and go anyway. Ben nodded and hurried from the room, leaving Kate alone with her thoughts and the weight of command. She knew that what she was contemplating would likely end her military career, but she also knew that some things were more important than career advancement. The oath she had taken as a young officer included a promise to protect human life wherever it might be threatened, and she intended to honor that promise regardless of the political consequences. The response from Earth Command came faster than she had expected. General Paul Rodriguez, the Supreme Commander of humanity's combined military forces, appeared on her personal communication screen with an expression that mixed determination with barely controlled anger. Kate, I've reviewed your request and the intelligence reports, Paul said without preamble. You have full authorization for the largest military mobilization since the Centauri Wars. We're calling in every favor, activating every reserve unit, and pulling ships from across human space. If the Zephyrians want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. Within 72 hours, the staging area near Proxima Centauri had become the largest concentration of human military power in history. Ships arrived from every corner of human space, their crews driven by a shared determination to show the galaxy that humanity would not tolerate attacks on its people. Captain Danny Wright brought his battleship UES Retribution from the Mars Defense Fleet, its massive hull bristling with magnetic rail cannons and fusion torpedo launchers. The ship's crew of 800 had volunteered for the mission despite knowing they might not return home. Danny himself was a veteran of 3 major conflicts, a steady commander whose calm demeanor masked a fierce protective instinct for human colonies. Captain Amy Foster arrived with the carrier Hughes Lightning Storm and its escort squadron, bringing 300 fighter craft and their pilots to the growing armada. Amy was younger than most capital ship commanders, having earned her position through exceptional performance during the asteroid belt conflicts. Her pilots were among the best in human space, trained to operate in the three-dimensional chaos of modern space combat. The fleet that assembled at Proxima Centauri represented more than just military hardware. Ships from the Earth Defense Force worked alongside vessels from the Colonial Guard, the Martian Navy, and even independent mercenary squadrons that had volunteered their services. Old rivalries and political differences were set aside in the face of a common threat to human survival. Commander Steve Phillips led a squadron of long-range interceptors from the Outer Colony Defense Corps, their sleek ships designed for hit-and-run attacks against superior forces. Steve had grown up on a frontier world similar to New Haven, and the thought of families facing Zephyrian occupation drove him to push his pilots harder than ever before. Chief Engineer Tony Bishop worked around the clock to coordinate maintenance and supply operations for the massive fleet. Keeping 400 ships operational during an extended military campaign required logistical precision that few humans had ever attempted. Tony's teams performed miracles of engineering, jury-rigging repair facilities, and manufacturing replacement parts using equipment that had never been designed for such intensive use. Communications. Officer Kelly Barnes managed the complex coordination required to keep the fleet functioning as a unified force. With ships from dozens of different organizations and military traditions, establishing common protocols and command structures was a challenge that tested every aspect of her training. She created communication networks that allowed seamless coordination between vessels that had never worked together before. As the fleet prepared for its final jump toward New Haven, Admiral Kate Chun stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, surrounded by displays showing the largest military formation in human history. 400 ships stretched across space in precise battle formations, their crews ready to face whatever the Zephyrians could throw at them. All ships, this is Admiral Chun, she broadcast across the fleet's communication network. Today we go to war not for territory or resources, but for something far more precious. We go to protect our people, to rescue our families, and to show the galaxy that humanity stands together when its children are threatened. The Admiral paused, looking at the tactical displays that showed their planned route to New Haven, 18 days of travel at maximum burn, pushing both crews and equipment to their absolute limits. When they arrived, they would face a Zephyrian fleet that outnumbered them 3-1, using technology that human scientists barely understood. "We may be outnumbered, and we may be outgunned," Kate continued, "but we have something the Zephyrians don't understand. We fight not just for victory, but for each other. We carry the hopes of every human settlement in the galaxy, and we will not let them down." The fleet jumped to hyperspace in perfect synchronization, their combined wake creating gravitational distortions that would be visible to astronomers for decades to come. Behind them, they left the safety of human space. Ahead of them lay the unknown dangers of a war that would determine whether humanity could survive in a hostile galaxy. In her private quarters, Kate Chun allowed herself a moment of doubt. She was leading the largest military force in human history into battle against an enemy they barely understood, gambling everything on the hope that human determination could overcome alien superiority. The weight of responsibility was almost crushing, but she drew strength from the knowledge that somewhere ahead, 3,000 human beings were counting on them for salvation. The journey to New Haven had begun. Part 4. The Battle of New Haven. Admiral Kethver stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Shadowblade, watching his occupation forces establish orbital mining platforms around the human colony world. The past 18 days had proceeded exactly as planned. The remaining humans on the surface had been contained in designated areas while Zephyrian engineering teams began converting the planet's infrastructure for Imperial use. It was a routine operation, one that Kethver had overseen dozens of times throughout his military career. The Admiral's confidence was absolute. His fleet of 700 vessels represented one of the largest military formations in Zephyrian space, equipped with technology that was centuries ahead of anything the primitive humans possessed. Each ship was a masterpiece of Imperial engineering, armed with plasma cannons and quantum disruptors that could reduce planets to cosmic dust. That confidence shattered when his sensor operators began detecting massive spatial distortions at the edge of the New Haven system. "Admiral," called out his tactical officer, "we're reading multiple hyperspace emergence signatures. Magnitude is off the scale. Something big is coming through." Kethver moved to the tactical display, his large black eyes studying the readings with growing unease. The spatial distortions were unlike anything in Imperial databases, suggesting technology that the Zephyrians had never encountered before. More concerning was the sheer scale of the disturbances, indicating an approaching force that dwarfed even his own massive fleet. The first human ships began emerging from hyperspace, like avenging angels, their hulls gleaming in the light of New Haven's star. Admiral Kate Chen's vanguard consisted of fast destroyers and scout vessels that spread out across the system's edge, providing reconnaissance and targeting data for the massive fleet that followed. Captain Danny Wright's battleship UES Retribution emerged from hyperspace with a flash of displaced energy that lit up Zephyrian sensors across the system. The massive vessel was followed by dozens of similar dreadnoughts, their hulls bristling with weapons that spoke of a species prepared for total war. Behind them came carriers, cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels in numbers that made even experienced Zephyrian officers question their tactical assessments. On the surface of New Haven, Jake Morrison and the remaining colonists watched streams of light appear in their night sky as hundreds of ships materialized in the darkness above their heads. The sight brought tears to his eyes as he realized that Earth had not forgotten them after all. Somehow, impossibly, rescue had arrived. "My God," whispered Dr. Chris Sullivan, standing beside Jake in the colony's observation dome. "Look at them all! I've never seen so many ships in one place." Lisa Hayes was working frantically at a portable scanner, trying to count the incoming vessels as they continued to emerge from hyperspace. "I'm reading over 400 signatures," she said in amazement. "This isn't just a rescue mission. This is the entire human fleet." Admiral Kethver's initial shock gave way to cold calculation as he assessed the tactical situation. The humans had brought impressive numbers, but his fleet still maintained technological superiority. Zephyrian plasma cannons could punch through. Human armor like paper, and their quantum disruptors could disable entire squadrons with single shots. All ships assume attack formation, Kethver ordered. Target the largest human vessels first. Show these primitives what happens when they challenge the Empire. The battle began when a squadron of Zephyrian scouts attempted to probe the human formation's defenses. Commander Steve Phillips led his interceptors in a devastating counterattack that caught the alien pilots completely off guard. Human fighters moved with a speed and aggressiveness that Zephyrian tactical doctrine had never accounted for. Swarming around the larger alien vessels like angry insects, Steve's pilots had trained for this moment their entire careers, practicing combat maneuvers in asteroid fields and planetary ring systems that pushed both their ships and their reflexes to the absolute limit. When they finally faced the enemy, they fought with a fury that surprised even themselves. "Fox Squadron, hit them fast and hard," Steve called out over the combat frequency. "Show these aliens what human pilots can do." The engagement escalated rapidly as both fleets maneuvered for advantage in the three-dimensional battlefield of space. Captain Amy Foster's carrier groups deployed thousands of fighter craft that overwhelmed Zephyrian point defenses through sheer numbers and tactical innovation. Her pilots executed combat maneuvers that Zephyrian computers had classified as impossible, using human intuition and creativity to overcome alien technological advantages. Admiral Kate Chun watched the battle unfold from the Bridge of the Vengeance. Her tactical displays showing a complex dance of destruction as hundreds of ships engaged across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Her years of training and experience came together in a moment of perfect clarity as she saw the weakness in the Zephyrian formation. "All ships execute hammer strike formation," Kate ordered. "We're going to hit them where they least expect it." The human fleet began a complex pincer movement that caught the Zephyrians completely unprepared. While Captain Wright's battleships engaged the enemy's main force in a grinding frontal assault, fast destroyers and cruiser squadrons swept around the flanks to attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Captain Wright stood on the bridge of the Retribution as enemy fire rained down around his ship. Zephyrian plasma cannons carved glowing wounds in his vessel's armor, but the battleship's crew fought back with everything they had. Human magnetic rail cannons hurled projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, punching through alien shields and hull plating with devastating effect. "Return fire, all batteries," Wright ordered calmly. "Show them what Earth steel can do." The Retribution's main gun spoke with thunder that could be felt throughout the ship, sending streams of coherent energy and kinetic projectiles toward the enemy fleet. Each shot represented the hopes and determination of 3,000 colonists who had refused to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. Chief Engineer Tony Bishop worked miracles in the fleet's engine rooms, keeping damaged ships operational through jury-rigged repairs and creative engineering solutions. When the cruiser U.S. Defiance lost main power, Tony's teams rerouted energy from life support systems to keep the ship's weapons online. When the destroyer UES Courage suffered critical hull breaches, his repair crews sealed the damage with emergency foam and prayers. Communications Officer Kelly Barnes coordinated the complex ballet of destruction, ensuring that human ships could communicate and coordinate despite the electronic interference created by hundreds of weapons firing simultaneously. Her communication networks allowed the fleet to fight as a unified force, sharing targeting data and tactical information in real time. The turning point came when Admiral Chun identified the Zephyrian flagship and ordered a concentrated assault on Admiral Kethver's position. Every available human vessel converged on the Shadowblade, overwhelming its defenses through sheer firepower and determination. Captain Wright personally led the final attack run, bringing the Retribution into point-blank range of the enemy flagship. Zephyrian weapons tore at his ship's hull, but Wright held course with the stubbornness that had made him a legend in the human fleet. "All guns target their command center," Wright ordered. "End this." The combined firepower of dozens of human Ships focused on a single point, punching through the Shadowblade's shields. An armor and a cascade of destruction that lit up the battlefield like a new star. Admiral Kethver died at his post, his final sight being the impossible image of primitive humans defeating the pride of the Zephyrian Empire, without their flagship and commanding officer. The alien fleet began to fragment. Some ships attempted to retreat while others fought to the death, but the human armada pressed their advantage relentlessly. Commander Phillips and his fighters hunted down fleeing vessels while the capital ships finished off the remaining resistance. Within 6 hours of the first shot being fired, the Zephyrian fleet had been completely destroyed. Not a single alien vessel escaped to carry word of their defeat back to the Empire. The greatest military force in Zephyrian history had been annihilated by humans who fought not for conquest, but for the simple right to protect their own people. As the last enemy ship exploded in a ball of superheated plasma, Admiral Chun allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had done the impossible, defeating a technologically superior enemy through courage, determination, and the unbreakable bonds that held humanity together across the vast distances of space. Part 5. Victory and Vindication. The silence that followed the battle was almost deafening. Where moments before the space around New Haven had been filled with the thunder of weapons fire and the brilliant flashes of exploding ships, now there was only the gentle drift of debris and the steady hum of human vessels maintaining their positions. Admiral Kate Chun stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching her tactical displays confirm what she could hardly believe. They had won. "Sweep complete, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Ben Harper. "No surviving Zephyrian vessels detected. The enemy fleet has been completely destroyed." Kate nodded slowly, the weight of victory settling over her like a heavy cloak. Around her, the bridge crew maintained their professional composure, but she could see the amazement in their eyes. They had just witnessed something that military historians would study for generations: a technologically inferior force defeating a superior enemy through sheer determination and tactical innovation. "Signal all ships," Kate ordered. "Begin search and rescue operations for any survivors, both human and alien. I want medical teams standing by to treat wounded personnel from across the fleet." Captain Danny Wright's voice crackled through the communication system from the Retribution. "Admiral, we're receiving transmission requests from the surface. Colony Administrator Morrison is requesting permission to speak with you directly." Kate felt a smile cross her face for the first time in weeks. "Put him through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Jake Morrison standing in what appeared to be the colony's communications center. Behind him, Kate could see other colonists crowding around, their faces showing a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. Jake himself looked older than his personnel file indicated, worn down by months of isolation and the terror of the past few weeks. "Admiral Chun," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is New Haven Colony. We knew you would come. We never stopped believing that Earth would answer our call." "Colony Administrator Morrison," Kate replied formally, then allowed her professional mask to slip slightly. "It's good to see you alive, Jake, all of you. We're sorry it took us so long to get here." "You arrived exactly when we needed you most," Jake said. "The Zephyrians were beginning final extraction operations when your ships appeared. If you had been even a few hours later—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Dr. Chris Sullivan appeared in the transmission, looking exhausted but relieved. "Admiral, we have wounded down here who need immediate medical attention. Several colonists were injured during the occupation, and our medical supplies were confiscated by the Zephyrians. Medical shuttles are already en route to your position," Kate assured him. "Our best doctors and full medical facilities are at your disposal." Captain Amy Foster's fighter squadrons were conducting patrol sweeps throughout the system, ensuring that no hidden Zephyrian forces remained. Her pilots reported finding several disabled human transport ships drifting near the system's edge, filled with colonists who had been evacuated during the initial Zephyrian ultimatum. "Admiral, this is Lightning Storm," Amy reported. "We've located the evacuation transports. All 3 ships are intact with no casualties." The families are requesting permission to return to the colony. Permission granted, Kate responded immediately. Let's bring everyone home. Over the next several hours, New Haven began to come alive again. The evacuation transports docked at the colony's landing platforms, reuniting families that had been separated during the desperate flight from Zephyrian occupation. Children ran through the corridors, laughing and playing as if the nightmare of the past few weeks had never happened. Lisa Hayes worked with human engineering teams to assess the damage to the colony's infrastructure. The Zephyrians had been surprisingly careful in their occupation, apparently intending to preserve the mining facilities for their own use. Most of the colony's systems were intact and could be restored to full operation within a matter of days. Bobby Martinez coordinated with human military police to secure the area and document evidence of Zephyrian war crimes. The aliens had established detention facilities where they had planned to hold human prisoners, and the discovery of these installations sent shockwaves through the human fleet. What had begun as a rescue mission had revealed evidence of a systematic campaign of genocide against human settlements. Commander Steve Phillips and his pilots were conducting detailed reconnaissance of the outer system, mapping Zephyrian supply depots and communication arrays that had been established to support the occupation. The intelligence they gathered would prove invaluable in understanding the scope of the alien Empire's expansion plans. Chief Engineer Tony Bishop led repair teams throughout the human fleet, assessing battle damage and beginning the complex process of restoring combat effectiveness to ships that had pushed themselves beyond their design limits. The victory had come at a cost. 14 human vessels had been destroyed and dozens more had suffered significant damage. But considering they had faced an enemy fleet nearly twice their size, the casualties were remarkably light. Communications Officer Kelly Barnes found herself overwhelmed with incoming transmissions from across human space. Word of the victory at New Haven was spreading through the quantum communication networks, reaching every human settlement and starbase within range. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Congratulations, offers of support, and requests for detailed information about the battle. The political implications of the victory became clear within days. The Zephyrian Empire, having lost nearly a quarter of their total fleet strength, found themselves facing internal unrest and external pressure from other galactic powers. Species that had been conquered or intimidated by Zephyrian expansion began to reconsider their positions. Seeing in humanity a potential ally against Imperial aggression, General Paul Rodriguez arrived from Earth 3 weeks after the battle, bringing with him a fleet of support vessels and the full authority of the human government. He met with Admiral Chun in the newly rebuilt conference center of New Haven Colony, surrounded by the colonists whose lives she had saved. The Zephyrian Empire has formally requested negotiations, Paul reported. They're offering territorial concessions and reparations in exchange for a ceasefire. The other galactic powers are watching closely to see how we respond. Kate considered the implications carefully. What are Earth's instructions? Earth has given you full authority to negotiate terms, Paul said with a slight smile. The World Parliament has decided that the person who won this victory should be the one to determine what we do with it. The negotiations took place aboard the Vengeance, with representatives from dozens of galactic governments observing the proceedings. The Zephyrian delegation was led by a different admiral, one who had not been present at the Battle of New Haven, and who seemed genuinely shocked by the extent of his empire's defeat. The final treaty established new principles for galactic expansion and territorial rights, recognizing the sovereignty of established settlements and prohibiting the forced relocation of sentient populations. More importantly, it established humanity as a major galactic power, one that other species would have to consider carefully before threatening human interests. Years later, New Haven became much more than a simple mining colony. It evolved into a symbol of human determination and a memorial to the principle that Earth never abandons its children. The rebuilt settlement grew into a major hub for human expansion into the Outer Rim, attracting colonists from across human space who wanted to be part of the legacy established by those first brave settlers. The Battle of New Haven entered military academies throughout the galaxy as a masterpiece of tactical thinking and strategic coordination. Young officers from dozens of species studied Admiral Chion's pincer movement and Captain Wright's final assault on the Zephyrian flagship. But for the people who had lived through those desperate hours, it remained something simpler and more profound. Proof that when humanity's family calls for help, the entire species answers as one. Jake Morrison continued as colony administrator for another decade, overseeing New Haven's transformation from an isolated mining outpost into a thriving center of human civilization. He never forgot the moment when Admiral Chen's fleet appeared in their darkest hour, and he made sure that every child born on New Haven learned the story of the day Earth came to save them. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about humans. That day, they would cross any distance, face any odds, and pay any price to protect their own. And in the vast darkness of space, that knowledge changed everything. Humanity was no longer just another species struggling for survival among the stars. They had become the guardians of the innocent, the defenders of the weak, and the champions of justice in a galaxy that had forgotten what those words meant. The age of human expansion had truly begun.